Hey, what's going on? Today we'll be working on a Harley-Davidson Street Glide seat. We're going to be doing a pretty common modification. I wanted to kind of just go over what we do again so people could see it. It's been a hot topic because it's that time of the year where everybody wants to ride their bike. But before we go over the seat that we're working on, I wanted to go over a couple of bikes in the shop here so you can kind of see some different examples of what needs to be done on touring bikes, especially now with all the baggers and stuff going on. We have a lot of things to talk about, so let me show you. Okay, so on this bagger here, we actually did this seat last year, and this is kind of like a common thing, and it's been going on for about 20 years, is that a lot of people who make seat pans, they'll use like an epoxy-based, paste, and they make it really thick, or they'll make a fiberglass pan that's just super thick. So this guy actually bought this seat pan from, I don't know, somebody who was making parts for this bagger clip stuff. And what ended up happening is the side here doesn't cover. I don't know what they were thinking, because the seat pan itself is so thick, it just doesn't fit. It sits actually on top of the tanks. It's kind of just not nice. Okay, so now another common problem that we run into, especially when you have big apes on these things, is that when you crack the throttle, you feel like you're sliding back, and you really need to be planted in the seat when you're riding your bike, because if you start scooting around, especially with your arms way up in the air, it's kind of sketchy. So what we're gonna do on this bike is we're actually gonna make a complete new fiberglass pan, form fitted to the bike. We're gonna make sure that you're able to scoot forward a little bit more by getting rid of this bolt. We're gonna bring the back of the seat forward like a drag seat, so it'll give you tremendous back support, which will be great. This way, when you crack the throttle, you'll be planted in the seat. You can see here, I already started to cut up the foam, and this is a very common modification we do with pretty much all touring style motorcycles. So this customer wants to keep his backrest here, so we have to keep the slot. What we did is we lowered him about 1.5 inches. We're narrowing the size right now. We kind of cut out more foam and put in a better grade foam. So that's why you can see it's like cut up on the edges really close. We also cut out where the tailbone support is and put a super soft foam here so that there's no pressure on the tailbone. And on the back seat, we actually cut it down, just because if you don't lower the front or the back with the front, sometimes the rear passenger will actually be sitting a lot higher and it gets wind buffeting. So we try to bring it down a little bit. On these Harley style seats, there's actually holes in here. So when you cut the foam out, there's actually a lot of holes. So we have to get rid of that and put just a better grade foam in there. I'm gonna finish grinding this and sculpting this seat, and then we're gonna go to making a custom cover. This guy actually is going with a full alligator or imitation alligator. Imitation alligator this year is like super popular, probably one of our most popular materials. I'm gonna trim this down, and then we'll trim it down, then I'm gonna show you it foamed up, and then we'll go make the seat cover. So one thing I want to go over before I finish up this foam is whenever you narrow the sides, it's actually super nice on any motorcycle. When you bring that side in, it gives you a lot more inner leg area so that you're flat-footed when you stand on the ground. It really helps out a lot. It's great for riding, it's great for standing up, but what ends up happening is you're narrowing the seat. So a lot of people will see a seat and it'll have a nice curve to it, which is great, but if your butt's 11 inches wide, which is where this is, and you curve this, you're gonna have a lot of pressure on both of your butt cheeks. What we end up doing is, because it's not as wide, I mean, if we were to do a 14-inch wide seat and actually from here start curving it, it'd probably hug the average butt. However, by narrowing it like this, it's not going. So we kind of flatten that out a little bit. And then if you could actually see, I'll run my finger across here. I don't know if you can see that, but so as you run your finger across, you can see the soft. It's like so much softer right there. See that? So this whole tailbone area is soft. So by eliminating any pressure on your tailbone, what we're doing is allowing your butt to actually absorb all of the weight of your body and all the vibration. So now, instead of having this pressure here, it's just evenly distributed on your butt cheeks. That works great. On the back, since we lowered that, on these style seats, they actually go up and get narrower the taller they get. So by lowering it, it widens it a little bit, not a lot. Maybe you're probably gonna gain 1 inch worth of seating surface, which is it's actually great for the rear passenger, because then you have a little bit more stability. We also shave the sides here depending on which person's riding style and habit they have. So we'll shave this a little bit. Sometimes we do a little bit more. If you do too much and your feet are on the rear pegs. You have no support. If you do too little, this puts a pressure inside of your legs, which isn't great for the rear rider. But so with that said, now I'm gonna finish sanding it and sculpting it and repairing it, and then we're gonna put another layer of foam on it and start making the cover for it. Okay, so the seat's pretty much foamed up. Now I made the design that we're gonna do on it. So this one here, we're keeping the backrest pocket. So we're gonna have to make a sleeve for there, and this is where our stitch is gonna be. We're gonna have one stitch going down and off, stitch coming around, and we're gonna do a little design stitch there just for cosmetics, and then we're gonna wrap this in alligators. Before I start stitching the cover together and making the pattern, I wanted to kind of go over patterning, because there's like so many different ways to do it. Everybody has their own unique style. Personally, you'll see me a lot of times just taking vinyl, throwing it over the seats and just cutting it out and going with that. Kind of don't like wasting time on patterns when the material is less expensive than taking the extra time to make the patterns. Also, the pattern, when you pattern with the material you're using, you really know the flow of it, and you can see where it's going to roll off the seat and where you need to stitch it. So, you know, different ways of patterning. Some people use clear plastic, the stuff you'd see on a couch cover or a slip cover, or even on covers for older cars. Just that clear plastic. They make it in different thicknesses. So some people will use that. The thinner stuff will form a little bit better. You could see what you're doing. You could mark it. They'll mark it with a Sharpie, and then you could trim it, and it's kind of nice doing it that way. Some people will actually use like tape, like masking tape, and they'll tape off the entire seat and they'll mark it, and they'll do their patterns in there. That works good too. Other people will use cardboard. I'm not a big fan of cardboard because it just takes forever to do that. You'll spend more time making a cardboard pattern to go off of, and honestly, when the material you're making a pattern with is too rigid to me, it doesn't allow you to be a creative with your patterning. So, you know, if you put a piece of cardboard here, you might want to roll your stitch around it, and, you know, to me it's just easier using the material. So on this one, I actually did make a pattern. I made the patterns out of just I had some cheap vinyl that we're not using, so I made the pattern around here. The reason I'm making the pattern is because, well, one, if you're using real exotics, you make patterns because you don't want to mess up. You know, you're talking, you know, materials that are thousands of dollars and you just don't want to waste it. However, on this one, we're just using an imitation gator, but you can see it does have a pattern, so, or a print pattern. So by doing that, by making our patterns, I'm able to lay it out on this material so I can get the same design and flow that I want with the actual graining of the material. So I'm gonna roll it all out, and we're gonna see how we make the patterns on the material. Okay, so as you can see here, the way you have to lay out these patterns, you actually waste a lot of material, because when this piece ends, it has to meet this next piece. So what you have to do is you go back your 3/8 or 1/2 inch, whatever you use for your Savage, and mine shows ending here. So then you want to make sure that this pattern at 3/8 or 1/2 inch, whatever you choose to use, matches up with the same exact width in the same exact pattern of this seat. So now this one's here is going to meet up with here. Luckily, this pattern repeats very quickly, but you can see over this whole area, there's actually a lot of material that ends up getting wasted.